Good morning. This is the second in the weekly series with Brandon Silver on commonly asked construction questions, construction question time. And the question this week for you, Brandon, is what is the difference between abatement and set-off?
So this is a question that we get commonly asked and is something that can get confused between the two. So this is a very good question. So abatement and set-off are two types of defences that a party can rely on when it is defending a claim against itself for payment, and it would have the effect of extinguishing or reducing the claim for payment. So that's the common similarity between the two of them. So I think the best thing is first discuss what abatement is, and then by way of comparison what set-off is. So abatement is the principle that a party can defend itself against a claim for payment under the contract by asserting that the works have either not been undertaken or a part thereof, or alternatively prove that the works are defective. Now, if the employer, i.e. the party that is it owes the money, can prove that the works are defective or that they have not been undertaken, then of course the value of the works will have diminished. And this is the basis that the employer can reduce the amount that he owes. Because let's say so I'll address an example in a minute, but the amount that will be reduced by the party that is wanting to pay the money, that has to pay the money, will be reduced by the amount that the value of the works has diminished. So let's look at an example now. There's been a wall that has been erected and constructed, and the contractor is consequently claiming a sum of £100 for completing the works. If the employer can prove that the works are defective, then the employer can on this basis reduce the amount that he owes. Now, let's say that the wall is so defective that it needs to be knocked down and rebuilt. Then the value of this wall will be zero because it's going to be knocked down. And on this basis, the employer can reduce the amount that he owes, i.e. the £100, to zero. So it'll be the full amount reduced so that the value is nil and doesn't have to pay anything. So this is how abatement occurs. Now, it follows from this example that the measure of abatement cannot exceed the original amount that the contractor is claiming. So, as in the example of the wall, or any example, say that a contractor is claiming £2,500 for the works as of today's date. If the works are defective to the extent that they are valueless, the maximum that can be deducted is the full amount as claimed by the contractor. Okay, so moving on to set-off. Set-off operates in the same way as abatement in the sense that it can be a defence which can reduce or extinguish a claim. However, with set-off, you require two elements. Firstly, you need breach by the party claiming the payment under the contract. And secondly, you need damages being sought as a consequence of that breach. So the best thing to do is to explain this with an example. So I'm going to return to the example of the wall. Of course, we've already demonstrated, and the employer would have to prove this, that the wall is defective. If the wall is defective, then of course the contractor will be in breach of his obligations under the contract to complete the work in accordance with the contract and with due care and diligence. So that's the first element satisfied. The second element that then would need to be, which is part of set-off, which is of course that as a consequence of that breach, damages are being sought, i.e. the cost of rectifying the defective wall, which would include knocking down the wall and therefore rebuilding it. Now, this claim of damages would be a counterclaim because it's against the contractor. And let's say, for example, that the cost of doing all this work is £150, knocking it down and rebuilding it. Now, this counterclaim of £150, the employer would seek to set this off against the sum that he owes £100, being the value of the works, as discussed at the beginning, for the wall. Now, the net effect of this is that, in fact, the employer would actually be claiming £50 from the contractor, and the contractor's claim for payment would be extinguished. The contractor would no longer be seeking the £0, and instead the employer would be seeking the £50. So this is how set-off operates, and therefore you can see the main difference between set-off and abatement is that abatement will be a deduction of the original valuation, whereas set-off is a counterclaim and that there is a breach, and that the damages are seeking to set off the sum that the contractor is claiming. Okay, I'm now going to discuss with you a very interesting case which hones in on a few more points concerning set-off and abatement. So the case is Ruxley Electronics and Construction Limited versus Forsyth. Now, this case was concerning the construction of a swimming pool. And as per the contract, the swimming pool had to be built to a specified depth. Now, you can probably foresee what the issue was. The pool was built, but it was not built to the depth as specified in the contract. It was shallower than as specified. Now, the contractor who built the pool was claiming payment for the completion of the works, and the employer was seeking to set off against the sum being claimed against them the cost of rectifying the swimming pool by rebuilding it, so redigging it up and ensuring that it was to the correct depth as specified in the contract. Now, the interesting thing about this case was the contractor had no intention of actually rebuilding the swimming pool and digging it up and making it to the appropriate depth. They were going to keep it to the same depth as it is currently. And it was held because of this, and because of the fact that the depth of the pool was safe enough that it could be, anyone could dive in it and it wouldn't cause any injury, that the value of the loss suffered despite the breach was none. There was no loss in value. So the interesting thing and what is held in this case is you can only set off if you will or have incurred costs of rectifying the defect. And in this instance, because there was no intention of rectifying it, there was no set off that could be occurred. However, having said that, what it was held in the case, which does make sense, was that a nominal fee was awarded to the employer of £2,500. So this could be set off against the sum being claimed by the contractor. The reason being this, simply that if there wasn't an award, any sum being awarded, then it would mean that the contractual obligation was illusory, and we can't be having that. If it's in the contract, then it should be met. But it was only, so this is a good case for showing, one, the quantification of the value and how you can deduct it, so the value of the abatement, and also when set-off cannot apply. Okay, I'm now just going to return to abatement. So there's case law out there that says you cannot abate when there's a claim for professional costs, for professional services. So professional services would include project management services and surveying. So the case law said, that you can't abate in these situations. However, there is an exception, and the case of this is William Clark Partnership versus Dock Street. Now, what this case held was that you can abate, i.e. you can deduct from the sum being claimed if A, the services were not performed at all, or B, the services were so poorly performed that they are worthless. Now, the basis of this is that there's a total failure of consideration. So consideration is an essential element of the formation of a contract. And what consideration is the exchange of one thing for another. So in this case, it'd be the exchange of money from one side to the other being the services performed. Now, obviously, of course, there's no consideration on the part of the person that's being appointed if they're not performing the services, or the services are so poor that they are worthless. So looking at the scope of this exception, this case is very good for, first of all, giving an example when the services were not performed, and the defining the scope of when the works are so poorly performed they're worthless. So let's look first of all at when they were not performed. One of the terms as part of the appointment was that they had to provide, William Clark Partnership had to provide monthly cost reports. They did not do this. So this would be under the services not performed. And what it was held was that this would fall within the exception, and the sum that they are claiming can be reduced by the value of the time that they have saved by not completing this work. So the monthly cost reports, it was deemed that they have saved 200 hours, which would equate to £25,000. So this could be abated, this could be deducted from the sum that they are claiming. Okay, so that can work in that situation because the services have not been performed. In this case as well, they were also arguing that there was another obligation on William Clark Partnership to settle and agree the final account. Now, although they did not do this as per the contract, They did, however, provide informal advice to Dock Street. Now, because they provided informal advice, it was held that this was not valueless, it was not worthless, and therefore did not fall within the exception of so poorly performed that it was worthless. So this does demonstrate that, so this meant that you could not deduct in relation to the services with relation to the final account. So this just shows the high threshold in relation to worthlessness. So yeah, that's that case. The important thing to note, and this is in relation, so this is moving away from the case law now, is that for both the defences of abatement and SetOff to apply, you need to issue the appropriate pay less or payment notice. This must be timely, which would be as per the contract, or alternatively the scheme would apply, and it must be valid. If you do not serve a valid and timely pay less / payment notice, then you cannot rely on the defences of SetOff and abatement. So this is very, very important and to note. Okay, so that summarises the differences between abatement and SetOff. Just a brief note talking about it in practice. We have a lot of issues and questions that commonly arise with disputes as to the final account and issues regarding release of retention. Of course, the employer will hold a retention account of monies in the event that at the end of the project there are defects, and therefore would use the money in the retention account to set off any costs for rectifying the defects. Now, this can obviously lead to a lot of disputes because whether or not there are defects and whether or not they are entitled to withhold monies from the retention account and be released. So this is disputes that we commonly get. So if you have any questions in relation to final account, release of retention, the defences of SetOff or abatement, then please do not hesitate to contact me. My email address is brownandsilver@silverllp.com. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for clarifying that and for the very interesting case law, Brandon. And we look forward to seeing you again next week. What will you be dealing with next week?
So next week I will be doing contra preferentum rule, how it applies and what the meaning of it is.
Perfect. We look forward to that. Thank you very much. We'll see you then.
Thanks, Julie.